The envelope sits on the low wooden table between us. It's thick, white, unmarked. I don't need to open it to know what's inside. The weight of it is cultural, historical, personal. It's heavy enough to buy my silence, my departure, my broken heart. Across from me, she waits. Ji-hoon's grandmother. Her hands are folded in her lap, the knuckles swollen from a lifetime of work, of kneading dough and shaping rice and holding her family together through wars and recessions and the relentless march of a country that transformed itself at lightning speed. She doesn't look cruel. She looks certain. And somehow, that's worse. Outside, Seoul hums. The city that never stops moving, never stops growing, never stops demanding. But inside this hanok, this traditional house tucked behind a modern glass building like a secret, time moves differently. The wooden beams are dark with age. The paper screens filter the harsh city light into something soft, something forgiving. I came to this country to teach English, to escape a small town where everyone knew my name and my failures. I wanted neon chaos, anonymity, adventure. I never expected to find a home. I never expected to find him. And I certainly never expected to be sitting here, being offered a small fortune to walk away from both. Let me go back. To the beginning. To the girl who stepped off the plane at Incheon Airport with 2 suitcases and a teaching contract she barely understood. That first month was survival. I learned to navigate subways with complex transfers, to bow at the correct angle to my bosses, to master the art of not making eye contact with the pushy vendors in Myeongdong. My apartment was a showbox in Hongdae, all exposed pipes and a washing machine that also served as my television stand. I ate convenience store kimbap for dinner more nights than I care to admit. I was lonely, but it was the good kind of lonely, the kind where you're too exhausted to feel the sharp edges of it. I was building something new. I just didn't know what yet. On weekends, I forced myself to explore. I had a rule: pick a neighborhood, get lost, find your way back without Google Maps. It was reckless, maybe, but it made the city feel like mine. One Saturday in October, the air finally carrying that crisp edge autumn promises, I ended up in Bukshan. The tourist crowds were thick near the main drag, but I veered down a side alley, then another, until the sound of selfie sticks and chatter faded into something quieter. Traditional houses lined the narrow street, their tiled roofs stacked against the hillside like a staircase for giants. That's where I smelled it. Not the aggressive garlic and gochujang of the tourist restaurants, but something deeper. Toasted sesame oil. Seaweed being carefully charred. A hint of smoke and something sweet, like honey and soy meeting in a hot pan. My stomach, trained on instant noodles, screamed at me to follow it. The restaurant had no sign in English. Just a small wooden plaque with hanok calligraphy that I couldn't read. The entrance was obscured by an old wooden gate, slightly ajar. I almost walked past, but the smell held me hostage. I pushed the gate open. Inside, it felt like stepping into a dream. A small courtyard with carefully raked gravel. A single persimmon tree dropping fruit onto the stones. And beyond an open kitchen window, the silhouette of a man working. He didn't see me at first. He was focused entirely on the task in front of him, slicing vegetables with a precision that looked like meditation. The knife moved in a steady rhythm, each motion economical, practiced, perfect. He wore a simple white cook's jacket, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms that spoke of years of lifting heavy pots and kneading stubborn dough. His dark hair fell slightly across his forehead, damp from the steam of the kitchen. He wasn't just cooking. He was performing something ancient. I must have made a sound. A footstep on gravel, a sharp inhale. He looked up. His eyes were dark, serious, but when they landed on me, a flustered foreigner standing in his grandmother's courtyard like a lost tourist, they softened. Not with pity. With curiosity. He tilted his head, a silent question. I pointed at my nose, then at the kitchen, the universal sign for "it smells incredible." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. He gestured for me to sit at the single wooden bench outside the window, then disappeared back into the kitchen. He emerged minutes later with a small bowl. Not the massive portions I was used to from Korean barbecue places, but something delicate. A perfect square of tofu, chilled, topped with a precise julienne of vegetables and a single gochugaru thread for color. A tiny spoonful of sauce pulled at the side, soy sauce, sesame oil, a whisper of vinegar. He placed it in front of me and waited. I took a bite. And I swear, for a moment, the noise of Seoul stopped. The tofu was silk. The vegetables were crisp. The sauce was a symphony, salty, nutty, bright. It was the most intentional food I had ever eaten. Nothing was accidental. Everything had a reason. I looked up at him, and he was watching me with an intensity that should have been unsettling but felt instead like being seen. Really seen. "Good?" he asked. His first word to me in English. I nodded, unable to speak. He smiled then, a real smile, one that transformed his serious face into something warm, almost boyish. "I am Ji-hoon," he said slowly. "This is my family restaurant. My grandmother's, really. I just work for her." We talked for an hour. Well, he talked in broken English, and I listened with my whole body, filling in the gaps with context and the universal language of hand gestures. He told me about the restaurant, 80 years old, started by his great-grandmother. He told me about his training, years in the kitchen with his grandmother, learning not just recipes but philosophy, the importance of temperature, the spiritual duty of fermentation. He spoke about cooking the way artists speak about painting, the way poets speak about words. I told him I was a teacher, from a small town in a country he'd never visited, that I came here looking for something I couldn't name. He nodded like that made perfect sense. When I finally stood to leave, the sun was setting, painting the hanok tiles in gold. I asked how much I owed for the tofu. He shook his head. "You are guest. First time. No charge." I protested, but he was firm. "Come back," he said. "Next time, you pay. You eat many things. Promise." I promised. And I kept that promise. The next Saturday, I was back. And the Saturday after that. Each time, he prepared something new, not from the menu, but from his heart. A soup that tasted like ancestors were watching over the pot. A fish grilled so perfectly the skin crackled like music. Rice that had been steamed in a stone pot until it developed a golden crust, then covered in cold water at the end to become a soothing porridge. He fed me, and in being fed, I started to feel less hungry, less lonely, less lost. We fell into a rhythm. My weekdays were chaos, classrooms full of bright-eyed students, lesson plans, the endless admin of expat life. Saturdays were for him. For the hanok. For a world that moved at the pace of fermentation, not Wi-Fi signals. He taught me Korean words, and I corrected his English pronunciation. We communicated in a hybrid language that belonged only to us. One evening, after the last customer left, he invited me into the kitchen. The space was immaculate, every surface gleaming, every tool in its designated place. He handed me an apron. "You learn," he said. "You make something. I help." I was terrible. My knife cuts were clumsy. I over-seasoned the vegetables. I burned the edge of the jawn. But he didn't laugh. He stood behind me, his hand guiding mine on the knife handle, his voice low in my ear counting out the rhythm of the chop. 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 Steady. Slow. I could feel the warmth of him, the patience. No one had ever been patient with me before. Not like this. When we finally ate, my imperfect creation alongside his flawless ones, he looked at me across the small table in the empty restaurant and said, "You are different here. In Seoul. You are peaceful." It wasn't a question. It was an observation. And he was right. In his kitchen, in his world, the noise in my head quieted. The girl who ran away from home, who couldn't hold down a relationship, who hid behind sarcasm and self-deprecation, she faded. I became someone who could be still. Someone who could be seen. "I am," I whispered, "when I'm with you." He reached across the table and took my hand. His palm was rough, calloused, warm from the stove. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The gesture said everything. "You are welcome here. You belong." That night, walking back to my Showbox apartment through the neon-lit streets, I realized I was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind you don't recover from. Because somewhere between the tofu course and the handholding, I had stopped being a tourist in my own life. I had started wanting to stay. 2 months later, he asked me to meet his grandmother. It was presented casually, like it was nothing. "She wants to thank you," he said, "for being my friend, for making me happy." But I knew better. In a culture built on family and legacy, meeting the grandmother wasn't casual. It was everything. It was the threshold. Pass through it, and you're real. Fail, and you're forgotten. I prepared for weeks. Bought a modest outfit. Practiced my bow. Memorized phrases of respect. I wanted her to like me. No, I needed her to like me. Because somewhere along the way, without permission or announcement, I had started loving her grandson. The dinner was at the Hannock. The family home, not the restaurant. It was the first time I'd seen the private quarters, the rooms where Ji-hoon grew up, where his father's photographs hung on the wall, where the ghosts of 3 generations watched from the wooden frames. She was smaller than I expected. Frail, almost, in her traditional dress, her white hair pulled back severely. But her eyes missed nothing. She assessed me the moment I walked through the gate, and I felt the weight of that assessment like physical pressure. We ate in silence at first. Her food, of course, was beyond perfect. Each dish a meditation. Each flavor a memory. She asked me questions through Ji-hoon. Where was I from? What did my parents do? Why did I come to Korea? Innocent questions, but layered with subtext. Who are your people? What is your worth? Can you contribute to something larger than yourself? I answered honestly, humbly. I watched her face for approval and found none. Just that steady, assessing gaze. At the end of the night, she spoke directly to me in Korean. Ji-hoon translated, his voice careful. She says you have good heart. But heart is not enough. She wants to see you again. Alone. The words hung in the air between us. Ji-hoon looked confused, slightly worried. But he squeezed my hand. It's okay, he said. She just wants to know you. It's tradition. I smiled, nodded, played the part of the eager girlfriend. But something cold settled in my stomach. A warning I couldn't name. That was 3 days ago. And now I'm sitting here, in this same Hannock, with that envelope on the table between us. No Ji-hoon. No translation. Just me, the grandmother, and her offer. She clears her throat softly. The sound pulls me back to the present. Back to this moment. You love him, she says in careful, practiced English. It's not a question. I nod, my throat tight. Then you will understand. She pushes the envelope slightly toward me. Just an inch. But the gesture is everything. This is not cruelty. This is love. Different love. For family. For future. I stare at the envelope. Inside, I know, is enough money to erase my debts. Enough to start over somewhere new. Enough to buy my freedom from the loneliness I came here to escape. But freedom from loneliness isn't the same as finding home. And sitting here, in this room that smells of pine wood and sesame oil and 80 years of family history, I realize I already found my home. It's not a place. It's a person. It's him. The grandmother waits. Patient. Certain. A guardian at the gate. And I have to decide, do I take the money and run? Or do I stay and fight for a love that may never fully accept me? The envelope sits between us. Heavy. Silent. Waiting. I didn't take the envelope that day. I couldn't. My hands stayed frozen at my sides, fingers digging into my palms until the crescents of my nails left marks. The grandmother watched me struggle, her expression unreadable, and then she simply nodded, tucked the envelope back into the folds of her traditional dress, and said, You think. You come back. No rush. But there was a rush. There was always a rush. The city outside pulsed with urgency, and my heart pounded with a fear I couldn't name. I stumbled out of the Hannock into the Seoul evening, the neon lights blurring into watercolor streaks as my eyes filled with tears I refused to shed. Not yet. Not here. Not where she might see. I didn't tell Ji-hoon. How could I? Hey, Your grandmother just offered me a small fortune to disappear from your life. How was your day? The words wouldn't form. The betrayal felt too immense, too complex to fit into sentences. So I buried it. I smiled when he called. I laughed at his jokes. I showed up at the restaurant the next Saturday like nothing had happened, like I hadn't been handed a price tag for my love. But something had shifted. The grandmother's invitation hung between us now, invisible but undeniable. Every meal Ji-hoon prepared tasted different, tinged with the knowledge that I might be eating my last ones. Every touch from him felt borrowed, stolen from a future that might never arrive. Winter came to Seoul with a vengeance that year. The kind of cold that seeps through your bones and settles there, making you forget what warmth ever felt like. I taught my classes bundled in layers, my students giggling at my puffy silhouette. At night, I lay awake in my showbox apartment, listening to the wind rattle the windows, replaying the grandmother's words over and over. This is not cruelty. This is love. Different love. I started researching. Late nights with my laptop, diving into Korean culture, family structures, the weight of tradition. I learned about the concept of HYO, filial piety, the duty children owe their parents and grandparents. I learned about the sacrifices families make to preserve legacies, the expectations placed on elder sons, the quiet pressure that shapes entire lives. Ji-hoon wasn't just a chef. He was the keeper of a flame lit by his great-grandmother, passed down through generations of women who had sacrificed everything to keep that restaurant alive. And here I was, a foreigner who couldn't properly pronounce the name of a single banchan, who burned Jawn and confused my honorifics, who had no context for the cultural weight of every ingredient, every gesture, every silent moment in that kitchen. Who was I to insert myself into that story? The invitation came 3 weeks after the envelope. Not from the grandmother directly, but through Ji-hoon, delivered with the casualness of someone asking you to coffee. My grandmother wants you to come for dinner, he said. We were in the restaurant kitchen after closing, cleaning up together like we always did. He was scrubbing a pot, his back to me, his voice light. Just family. No pressure. She liked you. I almost laughed. She liked me so much she tried to pay me to leave. But I swallowed the bitterness and said, of course. I'd love to. The night arrived faster than I wanted. I dressed carefully, a modest sweater, dark pants, minimal jewelry. I brought fruit, expensive ones arranged in a basket the way I'd seen Koreans do in dramas. Ji-hoon picked me up at my apartment, and the walk to the hanok felt like a death march. Each step closer to that traditional gate, my chest tightened. The family home was different at night. Warmer. Lanterns glowed behind paper screens, casting soft shadows on the courtyard stones. The persimmon tree stood bare now, winter having stripped it of its fruit and leaves, but somehow it looked more beautiful this way, honest, exposed, waiting. Inside, the table was already set. Not the low restaurant tables, but the family table, round and intimate, crowded with dishes that steamed and smelled of a lifetime of practice. And there, at the head, sat the grandmother. Smaller than I remembered, but no less formidable. She wore a simple navy blouse, her white hair pinned neatly. When I entered, she rose slightly, a gesture of respect that caught me off guard, and gestured for me to sit beside her. The shock almost undid me. Beside her. Not across from her. Beside. Dinner was an education. Ji-hoon's mother was there too, a quiet woman with tired eyes and hands that moved constantly, refilling water glasses, adjusting dishes, anticipating needs before they were spoken. She smiled at me nervously, apologetically almost, and I wondered what story she carried. What sacrifices she had made to marry into this family. What the grandmother had asked of her, 30 years ago, when she was the outsider at this table. We ate in layers of conversation. Ji-hoon translated when needed, but the grandmother spoke to me directly more often than I expected. Simple Korean sentences I could almost understand. Questions about my family, my childhood, my reasons for coming to Korea. I answered as best I could, my Korean clumsy but earnest, and something in her eyes shifted each time I tried. Not softening exactly, but observing, recording. After the meal, the mother cleared the dishes despite my protests. Ji-hoon was called to the kitchen to help with something, A deliberate move, I realized too late. And then I was alone with her again. The grandmother. The matriarch. She didn't bring out the envelope this time. Instead, she poured tea, a green tea so delicate it tasted like mist and mountains, and spoke to me in slow, careful English. "You love my grandson," she said. Not a question this time. A statement. "Yes," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. "And he loves you. I see this." She sipped her tea, watching me over the rim. "Love is not problem. Love is easy. Easy part." I waited. The tea cooled in my hands. Hard part is what comes after. She set down her cup and folded her hands on the table. Those swollen knuckles. Those hands that had fed generations. "You know what he is. What he carries." "He's a chef," I said. "He carries your recipes. Your tradition." She shook her head slowly. "Not recipes. Philosophy. Way of seeing. Way of being. This restaurant is not business. Is, how you say, living museum. Of family. Of history. Of career that is disappearing." She paused, searching for words. "He must marry someone who understands this. Who can help him carry. Not just love him. Carry." The weight of her words settled on my chest. I wanted to argue, to insist that love was enough, that I could learn, that I was strong. But the words died in my throat because I knew she was speaking truth. Not cruel truth. Just truth. "I can learn," I whispered. "I want to learn. I want to carry with him." She looked at me for a long moment. Longer than comfortable. Longer than polite. Then she reached out and took my hand. Her skin was papery, warm, impossibly fragile, and impossibly strong at once. "You try," she said quietly. "This I see. But trying and being are different." That night, walking home alone through the frozen streets, I couldn't shake the feeling of her hand on mine. The gesture had been almost tender, almost maternal. But underneath it, the same message persisted. "You don't belong here." Ji-hoon called when I got home. His voice was warm, happy. "She liked you," he said. "My mother said grandmother talked about you after you left. Said you have good heart." Heart is not enough. The grandmother's unspoken words echoed in my memory. "I'm glad," I managed. "She wants you to come again. Next week. She wants to teach you to make something. A family recipe." He laughed, delighted. "She never teaches anyone. This is huge. This is everything. Everything. Or maybe nothing. Maybe just another test I was destined to fail." The cooking lessons began. Every Saturday afternoon, I showed up at the hanok, and the grandmother met me in the kitchen. No Ji-hoon allowed. Just me, her, and ingredients that felt like artifacts. She taught me to make jangudji, soy-pickled vegetables, explaining through gestures and simple words the importance of timing, of pressure, of patience. She showed me how to fold mandu so the pleats faced the same direction, each one a tiny prayer for prosperity. She let me stir the doenjang jigai, her hand guiding mine on the ladle, showing me the rhythm of fermentation, the dance of bubbles that signaled doneness. We rarely spoke. Language was a barrier we couldn't fully cross. But in the kitchen, we found another language. The language of touch, of taste, of shared attention to small things. I learned to read her nods, her silences, the slight tilt of her head that meant good enough or try again. One afternoon, after I successfully shaped rice into jumikbap without crumbling it, she looked at me and said, "You have patience. This is good." It was the first compliment she'd ever given me. I held onto it like a lifeline. But even as I collected these small victories, I felt the weight of what I was losing. Ji-hoon and I had less time alone now. Our Saturdays, once sacred, were consumed by these lessons. Our conversations shifted, less about us, more about the grandmother's approval, the family's expectations, the future that loomed like a wall we couldn't see over. One night, lying in my tiny bed, Ji-hoon's voice soft in my ear through the phone, I almost told him. Almost spilled everything, the envelope, the offer, the impossible choice I carried alone. But his next words stopped me. My grandmother told my mother something, he said. She said you have the hands of a cook. She said maybe the spirit sent you. Maybe the spirit sent you. The words should have felt like acceptance, like belonging. But instead, they felt like a trap. Because if the spirit sent me, then the spirits could also take me away. And the grandmother knew this. She was preparing me for something. But for what? A place in the family? Or the strength to leave? I didn't sleep that night. I watched the neon lights flicker against my ceiling and thought about the envelope, still somewhere in the hammock, waiting. The grandmother hadn't mentioned it again. But I knew it wasn't gone. It was just patient. Like her. Like tradition. Like the slow, inexorable weight of history pressing down on a love that felt, in the dark hours of night, impossibly fragile. Spring came eventually. The persimmon tree in the courtyard budded, then bloomed. I learned to make bosom under the grandmother's critical eye, wrapping pork in cabbage leaves with the precision of someone who finally understood that food wasn't just food. It was memory, it was identity, it was love made edible. And then, one Saturday, after a lesson that ended with her rare smile, the grandmother asked me to stay. Ji-hoon was working at the restaurant. His mother was at the market. We were alone again. She made tea. The same green tea from that first dinner. And when she sat across from me, her eyes were different. Softer, but also more serious. I have watched you, she said. Many months. You try. You fail. You try again. This is good. This is Korean way. I nodded, my heart pounding. But trying is not enough. She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out the envelope. The same envelope. Still thick. Still white. Still waiting. My stomach dropped. I offer you choice again, she said quietly. But now, different reason. Not because I think you are wrong. Because I think you are right. And right is harder. She pushed the envelope toward me. If you stay, you suffer. You will always be outsider. Always prove. Always carry weight you didn't choose. This money, she tapped the envelope, is freedom. From that weight. From that suffering. You take it, you go, you build life where you belong. Easy. Clean. I stared at the envelope. Then at her. And if I don't take it? She smiled then. The first real smile I'd ever seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look young, almost girlish. Then you stay. And you fight. And maybe you win. Maybe you lose. But you fight. She leaned forward. I had this choice too. 40 years ago. Different country. Different time. Same fear. She paused. I stayed. I fought. Some days I regret. Some days I don't. The envelope sat between us. Heavy with possibility. Heavy with escape. Heavy with the cost of staying. Choice is yours now, she whispered. No right answer. Only your answer. I looked at the envelope. I thought about Ji-hoon's hands guiding mine on the knife. His laugh in the empty restaurant. The way he said my name like it mattered. I thought about the grandmother's swollen knuckles, 40 years of fighting, 40 years of carrying. And I made my choice. My hand moved before my brain could stop it. I reached across the low table and pushed the envelope back toward her. Not sliding it gently, not with hesitation. I pushed it like it burned, like touching it too long would sear the choice into my skin forever. No, I said. My voice came out stronger than I expected. I don't want your money. I want him. The grandmother looked at the envelope, then at me. Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked almost disappointed. Not in my choice, but in my certainty. Like I had answered a test question wrong without realizing it. You are young, she said quietly. Young thinks love conquers. Old knows love survives. Different things. She left the envelope on the table between us. Not pushed back to her side, not accepted as refusal. Just there. A presence. A possibility. A door left slightly open. You keep, she said, standing with the slow grace of someone whose body has learned to negotiate with pain. For when you change mind, no shame in changing mind, only shame in not having choice. She walked to the kitchen doorway, then paused. Without turning around, she spoke again. He does not know about this. My offer. He cannot know. This is between women. This is protection. For him. For you. For everyone. She turned then, and her eyes held mine with an intensity that pinned me to my seat. You tell him, you break more than his heart. You break family. You understand. I understood. The threat was velvet covered, but it was a threat nonetheless. Tell Ji-hoon about the money, and the grandmother would deny everything. And who would he believe? The foreign girlfriend of 1 year, or the woman who raised him, who fed him, who shaped every value he held? I understand, I whispered. She nodded once and disappeared into the kitchen. I sat alone with the envelope for a long time, the hammock settling around me with its ancient creaks, the persimmon tree casting afternoon shadows across the courtyard stones. I took the envelope. I don't know why. Maybe because leaving it felt like defiance I couldn't afford. Maybe because some part of me, the practical part raised in a small town where money was always tight, couldn't abandon that kind of cash. Or maybe because the grandmother was right. Having a choice, even an unthinkable one, is better than having no choice at all. I hid it in my apartment, buried it in a drawer under sweaters I never wore. Out of sight, but never out of mind. It sat there like a secret tumor, growing in the dark, poisoning everything it touched. Because everything changed after that day. Not dramatically. No screaming fights, no dramatic exits. The change was quieter, deeper. The grandmother continued our cooking lessons. Ji-hoon continued to love me with his whole heart. His mother continued to smile her nervous, apologetic smile. On the surface, nothing was different. But underneath, I was drowning. Every time the grandmother taught me a new recipe, I wondered, is this inheritance or insurance? Every time Ji-hoon talked about the future, our future, the restaurant's future, the family's future, I heard the envelope whispering from its drawer, you could leave. You could escape. You could start over. The worst part was the dreams. I started dreaming about the money. Not spending it, not using it, just holding it. Stack after stack of bills in my hands, growing heavier until my arms ached, until I couldn't breathe, until I woke gasping in my sweat-damp sheets with Ji-hoon's name on my lips. I lost weight. My students noticed. Teacher, you sick? They asked, their young faces scrunched with concern. I smiled and said I was fine. I was never fine. One night in early summer, Ji-hoon took me to Namsan Tower. Tourists go there to attach padlocks to the fence, symbols of love meant to last forever. He bought a lock, cheap silver, nothing fancy, and handed me a permanent marker. Write something, he said. Us. Together. Forever. I stared at the lock. The metal felt cold in my palm. Forever. What did forever mean when an envelope full of cash sat in my drawer, waiting for me to crumble? I wrote our initials. Simple. Safe. No promises I couldn't keep. Ji-hoon wrote more. A date, the day we met. A phrase in Korean I didn't understand. When I asked, he just smiled and locked it onto the fence with the thousands of others, shaking it to make sure it held. What did you write? I asked again as we walked back toward the cable car. Something true, he said. He took my hand, his rough palm warm against my clammy skin. I wrote, she taught me to see. Tears stabbed my eyes. I blinked them back, furious at myself for crying, furious at him for being so good, furious at the grandmother for putting me in this impossible place. That's beautiful, I managed. No, he said, stopping to face me. The city light spread below us, a galaxy of neon and possibility. You are beautiful. You are everything. I was asleep before you, cooking on instinct, not feeling. You woke me up. He kissed me then, soft and deep, and I kissed him back with everything I had. Because I meant it. Every touch, every breath, every heartbeat. I loved him. I loved him so much it hurt, so much it was destroying me. And that's when I knew the envelope wasn't just money. It was a mirror. And in its reflection, I saw the truth I'd been running from. I loved him enough to stay. But did I love him enough to destroy him? The answer came 3 days later. Ji-hoon's mother called me, a rare event, since we usually communicated through Ji-hoon. Her English was minimal, but I understood enough. The grandmother was sick. Hospital. Could I come? I went. Of course I went. I found Ji-hoon in the waiting room, his face grey with exhaustion, his chef's hands trembling in his lap. The grandmother had collapsed at the restaurant. Heart issues. They were running tests. She asked for you, he said, confused. You. Not me. Not my mother. You. A nurse led me to her room. She looked smaller than ever in the hospital bed, tubes snaking from her arms, machines beeping their mechanical reassurance. But her eyes, those eyes still missed nothing. They tracked me as I entered, as I approached, as I sat in the plastic chair beside her bed. Close door, she whispered. I did. You have envelope, she said. Not a question. I nodded. Good. She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. When she opened them, they were wet. I had never seen her cry. I didn't think she could. I am dying, she said. Maybe soon. Maybe later. But dying. Grandmother. Listen. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. The grip was impossibly strong for someone so frail. I watch you. Many months. You struggle. You hide. You carry secret alone. This is strength. This is also weakness. I didn't understand. She saw my confusion and squeezed harder. I offer money to test you. First time, you pass? You fail? I don't know. But second time, her voice cracked. Second time, I offer because I see truth. You love him. Real love. Love that suffers. Love that stays even when staying hurts. Tears were running down my face now. I couldn't stop them. So I give you choice. Real choice. Not test. Not trick. Because I know, she pulled me closer, her face inches from mine. I know that love must choose. Every day. Must wake up and choose again. And I am tired. So tired. I cannot choose for him anymore. She released my wrist and fell back against the pillows, exhausted. Envelope is yours, she whispered. Keep it. Burn it. Use it. I don't care. But you must decide. Not for me. For him. For you. And whatever you decide, her eyes found mine one last time. You tell him. Everything. The money. The offer. My words. Your fear. Everything. But you said. I lied. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Sometimes mothers lie to protect. But grandmothers? Grandmothers tell truth when it matters. This matters. He deserves truth. You deserve truth. Even if truth breaks us all. I left the hospital in a daze. Ji-hoon called after me, but I couldn't stop. I walked through the Seoul night, past convenience stores and karaoke rooms and couples holding hands, until I reached my apartment. Until I reached the drawer. Until I held the envelope in my hands for the first time since the day she gave it to me. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The weight told me everything. For an hour, I sat on my floor, the envelope beside me, and I thought. About Ji-hoon. About his grandmother. About the restaurant and the legacy and the weight of tradition. About my small-town childhood and the reasons I left. About the woman I was becoming and the woman I wanted to be. And then I made a decision. Not the easy one. Not the clean one. The only one that felt like truth. I called Ji-hoon. Come over, I said. Please. There's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you months ago. He heard something in my voice. I could feel his pause through the phone, the weight of his concern. I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. I hung up and looked at the envelope. Outside, Seoul hummed its endless song. Inside, my heart beat its own rhythm. Fear and hope and love all tangled together, impossible to separate. 20 minutes. Then everything would change. I picked up the envelope and waited. He stood in my doorway, and the sight of him almost undid me. Disheveled hair from running his hands through it too many times. Dark circles under eyes that usually held nothing but warmth. He'd come straight from the hospital, still wearing the clothes he'd slept in the night before, and somehow that made him more beautiful than ever. More real. More mine. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "Is it my grandmother? Did something happen? Did the hospital call?" "No. She's stable. She's resting." I stepped aside to let him in. This isn't about her. Not directly. He entered my tiny apartment, filling it with his presence the way he filled every space he occupied. His eyes went immediately to the envelope on my small kitchen table. The white rectangle sat there like an accusation, and I watched understanding dawn across his face in slow, terrible waves. "What is that?" His voice was careful now. Controlled. The voice of someone preparing for bad news. "Sit down." I don't want to sit down. I want to know what's happening. He didn't move toward the table. Didn't touch the envelope. Just stood there, arms crossed, face closed, waiting. So I told him. Everything. The first offer, months ago, in the Hannock when he was working at the restaurant. The second offer, just weeks past, after I'd proven myself in the kitchen. The envelope that had lived in my drawer like a secret pregnancy, growing heavier with each passing day. My fear. My silence. My shame at even considering it, at even keeping it, at even standing here now trying to explain the inexplicable. When I finished, the silence was absolute. No traffic noise from outside. No hum from the ancient refrigerator. Just two people breathing in a room too small for the weight between them. Ji-hoon walked to the table. He picked up the envelope. Turned it over in his hands. Didn't open it. "How much?" he asked quietly. "I don't know. I never opened it." He looked at me then, and the confusion in his eyes was worse than anger would have been. "You never opened it. For months, you carried this, and you never looked inside." It wasn't about the money. Then what was it about? His voice rose slightly, the first crack in his control. What was it about, if not the money? Because from where I stand, it looks like my grandmother offered you a bribe to leave me, and you kept it. You hid it. You built a wall between us made of secrets, and I didn't even know I was on the other side. I was protecting you. Protecting me. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. How does keeping this protect me? How does lying every day, smiling every day, touching me every day with this between us, how does that protect anyone? I had no answer. Because he was right. Every word he spoke was true, and the truth cut deeper than any lie I'd told. He didn't leave that night. I almost wished he would. Anger I could handle. Storming out, slamming doors, days of silence. These were familiar territories, mapped by past relationships that had crumbled for far smaller reasons. But Ji-hoon didn't storm. He sat on my floor, back against the wall, the envelope unopened beside him, and he asked questions. Hours of questions. Not accusations. Questions. Why didn't you tell me immediately? What did you feel when she first offered? Did you ever consider taking it? When did you decide not to? What changed? What almost changed? What still might change? I answered them all. Stripped myself bare in ways I'd never done with anyone. Told him about my loneliness before I met him, my fear of never belonging, my desperate need to prove myself worthy of a world I'd stumbled into by accident. Told him about the grandmother's words, her warnings, her strange tenderness that felt more dangerous than her cruelty. Told him about the dreams, the weight loss, the moments in the kitchen when I'd look at his hands and wonder if I'd ever feel them again. Somewhere around 3 a.m., he finally opened the envelope. Counted the money slowly, deliberately, arranging the stacks on my floor in neat rows. When he finished, he looked up at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. "Money. A lot of money. It's her life savings." He gestured at the stacks. Not the restaurant's money. Not family money. Her personal savings. From 60 years of working. From tips and small inheritances and gifts she never spent. She told me once this money was for emergencies only. For things that couldn't be fixed any other way. He paused. She considered you an emergency. The word hit like a physical blow. Emergency. Something to be contained, managed, eliminated. I'm sorry, I whispered. It felt pathetically inadequate. Don't be sorry. Be angry. He stood suddenly, pacing the small space. She had no right. No right to put you in this position. No right to test you, to manipulate you, to make you carry this alone. She's my grandmother. I love her. I honor her. But this, he pointed at the money, this was wrong. For the first time that night, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly, but possibility. Because he wasn't blaming me. He was seeing me. The real me, the one who'd suffered in silence, who'd almost broken 100 times, who'd loved him enough to stay even when staying meant drowning. I didn't know how to tell you, I said. Every time I tried, I heard her voice saying it would break the family. That you'd believe her, not me. That I'd lose everything. You almost lost everything by not telling me. He knelt in front of me, taking my face in his hands. Don't you understand? The secret was the danger. Not the money. Not her. The secret. Secrets grow in the dark. They get bigger, uglier, until they're too heavy to carry. And then they crush you. Tears finally came, the release I'd been holding back for months. He held me while I cried, his arm steady, his heartbeat solid against my ear. And in that moment, I understood something I'd missed before. Love isn't just the good parts. The laughter, the meals, the hand-holding on city streets. Love is also this. The ugly crying at 4 a.m. The confession of weaknesses. The being seen at your worst and not being abandoned. Morning came eventually. Grey light through my thin curtains. The city waking outside. And on my floor, stacks of money still arranged in neat rows, waiting to be dealt with. Ji-hoon made coffee in my tiny kitchen, moving through the space with the ease of someone who'd made himself at home long ago. When he handed me a cup, his eyes were clearer than they'd been all night. We need to see her, he said. Together. Today. The hospital? She's sick. She just had. Today. His voice was gentle but firm. This can't wait. It's already waited too long. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and anxiety. We walked through corridors of quiet suffering, past rooms where families kept vigil, until we reached the grandmother's door. Ji-hoon knocked once, then entered without waiting for response. She was sitting up in bed, looking better than I expected. Her color had improved. The machines were fewer. When she saw us together, something flickered in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or calculation, or both. You came, she said. Then, to me, you told him. Yes. She nodded slowly, as if confirming something she'd already suspected. Her gaze moved to Ji-hoon, to the envelope he carried, to the tension in his shoulders. You are angry, she said. Not a question. Sit down, grandmother. He pulled a chair close to her bed and sat, motioning for me to do the same. When we were both settled, he placed the envelope on her bedside table. This is yours. We don't want it. We never wanted it. She looked at the envelope, then at me. You didn't open it. I didn't need to. Something shifted in her face. Respect, maybe. Or regret. It was hard to tell. I was trying to protect you, she said to Ji-hoon. Both of you. From a future that would destroy you slowly instead of quickly. I have seen it happen. Foreign wives who never quite fit. Families torn apart by kindness that wasn't enough. I didn't want that for you. You don't get to decide that for us. Ji-hoon's voice was quiet but steel. You don't get to choose who I love, who I build my life with, who carries the legacy after you're gone. That's my choice. Mine and hers. Not yours. The grandmother closed her eyes. For a long moment, I thought she might be sleeping, or praying, or simply shutting us out. But when she opened them, They were wet. I was afraid, she whispered. That is all. Just afraid. Of losing you. Of losing everything we built. Of watching it crumble because of love that wasn't strong enough to carry the weight. How do you know it's not strong enough? I asked. The words came out before I could stop them. How do you know without giving it a chance? She looked at me for a long time. Then, slowly, she reached out and took my hand. Her grip was weaker than before, but her eyes held mine with that same intensity. I don't know, she said. That is the truth. I don't know. I was so sure I did. But now, she glanced at Ji-hoon, at the envelope, at me. Now I am not sure of anything. Ji-hoon took my other hand. The three of us sat there, connected in ways none of us had expected, the money on the table between us like a question no one could answer. Where do we go from here? I asked quietly. The grandmother was the one who answered. Forward, she said. Together. If you can forgive an old woman's fear. I looked at Ji-hoon. He looked at me. And in his eyes, I saw something I hadn't dared to hope for, certainty. We can try, I said. The grandmother nodded. Squeezed my hand once. Let go. And somehow, impossibly, the healing began. Healing is not a straight line. I learned this in the weeks that followed, as summer burned into autumn and the persimmon tree in the courtyard began dropping its fruit again. The grandmother was released from the hospital, weaker but unbowed. Ji-hoon returned to the restaurant with a new fire in his cooking, something deeper and more personal in every dish. And I showed up. Every Saturday. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because something had shifted, and I needed to see where it would land. The envelope never reappeared. Not on the table, not in conversation, not as a lingering shadow between us. The grandmother had taken it back that day in the hospital, and whatever she did with it, she never said. Sometimes I wondered if she burned it, the cash transforming to ash in some quiet ritual of release. Sometimes I wondered if she kept it, a reminder of the moment she almost lost her grandson by trying to save him. But mostly, I stopped wondering. The envelope belonged to the past now, and the past, I was learning, could finally release its grip if you let it. The cooking lessons continued, but they were different now. Less testing, more teaching. Less judgment, more patience. The grandmother still corrected my knife work, still shook her head at my clumsy folding, still muttered in Korean when I rushed to fermentation. But her hand on mine was gentler. Her silences felt like companionship rather than assessment. One afternoon, she taught me to make her mother's kongguksu, cold noodle soup in soybean broth, a summer dish that tasted like memory and mountains. As I stirred the soybeans she'd soaked overnight, she spoke more than she ever had before. I was 19 when I married, she said. Her English had improved, or maybe I had finally learned to listen better. My husband's mother did not want me. I was too poor, too plain, too nothing. I kept stirring, afraid that stopping would break the spell. She tested me. 4 years. Made me prove everything, every day. I hated her. A pause. Then I became her. I looked up. Her eyes were distant, focused on something I couldn't see. When my son married Ji-hoon's mother, I tested her too. Not as cruel, but still testing. Still making her prove. She shook her head slowly. We passed down pain without meaning to. Like recipe we never asked for. Is that why you tested me? She met my eyes. Yes. And no. I tested you because I was afraid. But also because I saw something in you. Something I recognized. What? Myself. The girl who stayed. The girl who fought. She reached out and touched my cheek, a gesture so tender it stole my breath. You are stronger than I was. You told him the truth. I never told my husband about his mother's tests. Never told anyone. Carried it alone for 60 years. Tears burned my eyes. I almost didn't tell him. I almost took the money and ran. But you didn't. She smiled, small and sad. That is the difference. That is everything. Winter came again. My second winter in Seoul. The first had been cold with loneliness, the city indifferent to my foreignness. This winter was different. I had people now. A chef who left notes in my lunchbox. A grandmother who corrected my pronunciation with something like affection. A mother-in-law-to-be who finally stopped smiling nervously and started smiling warmly. Ji-hoon proposed on the first snowy night of December. Not at Namsan Tower with its padlocks and tourists, but in the restaurant kitchen after closing. He was making dinner, just for us, just because, and I was watching him work, the same way I had that first day, mesmerized by the poetry of his movements. Without turning around, he said, "Marry me." I laughed. "Are you asking or telling?" He turned then, spatula in hand, flour on his cheek. Asking. Telling. Both. I don't have a ring. I don't have a speech. I just know that every dish I make tastes better when you're here to eat it. Every day is brighter. Every season warmer. I crossed the kitchen and took his face in my hands. Yes. He kissed me, and the rice boiled over, and we laughed, and it was perfect. The grandmother's reaction surprised everyone. When we told her, she nodded once, then stood and walked to a small wooden chest in the corner of the hammock. From it, she withdrew a package wrapped in traditional cloth, old, faded, clearly precious. "For you," she said, handing it to me. My wedding handbook. Traditional. Worn by my mother, her mother before. Now you. I unfolded it carefully, the silk sliding against my fingers like water. It was beautiful, cranberry red and deep green, embroidered with symbols I didn't understand but somehow felt. "I can't accept this," I whispered. "It's family treasure." "You are family." She said it simply, like it had always been true. Like there had never been a question. "You are family now. Treasure is for family." Ji-hoon's arm wrapped around my waist, and I felt him smile against my hair. The grandmother watched us, and for the first time since I'd met her, her eyes held nothing but warmth. The wedding was small. Traditional. Held in the Hanok courtyard under the persimmon tree, which someone had decorated with paper lanterns despite it being winter. The grandmother insisted on overseeing the food herself, every dish, every detail, every flavor passed down through generations. I wore the hanbok. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting all those decades for me to arrive. Ji-hoon wore his grandfather's wedding robe, and when I saw him waiting for me under the lanterns, I forgot to breathe. The ceremony was in Korean. I understood maybe half, but I felt all of it. The bows to our ancestors. The sharing of wine. The moment when the grandmother stood and spoke words I hadn't expected. "She came here alone," she said, addressing our small gathering. "Foreign. Lost. Afraid. She did not run. She stayed. She learned. She fought." Her voice cracked, just slightly. "She loves my grandson. But more than that, she loves our family. Our ways. Our food. Our future. This is not tradition. This is choice. And choice is stronger than tradition." She turned to me and bowed, a full bow, deep and formal. The room gasped. I stood frozen, not knowing what to do. "Thank you," she whispered. "For staying. For fighting. For choosing us." I bowed back, lower than her, the way she'd taught me. "Thank you for teaching me to belong." 5 years later, I sat in the same courtyard, the persimmon tree heavy with fruit, a small boy on my lap. His name was Ji-hoon Jr., a joke that became real when his father insisted, but we called him Hop Pie, for the way he'd hopped in my belly those last months. The restaurant had expanded. Not in size, but in reputation. People came from other countries to taste Ji-hoon's cooking, to experience the legacy his grandmother built. And every Saturday, I still cooked with her. Her hands were weaker now, her movements slower. But her eyes still missed nothing. "You burned the garlic again," she said, watching me from her chair. I did not. "Did too. Look." She pointed. She was right. I'd burned the garlic. Again. I sighed. "You'd think after 5 years I'd learn." "You learn. Slowly. But learn." She smiled, that rare full smile that transformed her face. Garlic is patient. You should be too. Hop Pie squirmed in my lap, reaching for his great-grandmother. She took him easily, settling him against her chest, humming an old song I'd heard her sing 100 times. Ji-hoon appeared in the kitchen doorway, flour on his apron, watching us with an expression I'd learned to read over the years. Love. Pure, simple, overwhelming love. She teaching you or torturing you? He asked. Both. Always both. He crossed the courtyard and kissed me, then kissed his grandmother's cheek, then tickled Hop Pie until the boy shrieked with laughter. Busy night tonight, he said. Big reservation. Important guests. More important than us. I teased. No one is more important than you. He said it simply, like breathing. Like truth. The grandmother watched us, her eyes moving from him to me to Hop Pie and back. And then she said something I'll carry forever. This is legacy, she said quietly. Not recipes. Not restaurant. This. She gestured at us, at our small family in the fading afternoon light. Love that chooses. Every day. This is what lasts. I looked at Ji-hoon. He looked at me. Hop Pie babbled something unintelligible and reached for the persimmon tree. And I thought about the girl who stepped off a plane with 2 suitcases, running from a life she didn't want, toward a city she didn't know. I thought about the envelope, the money, the offer that almost broke me. I thought about the choice I made, not once, but every day since, to stay, to fight, to belong. The grandmother was right. Love that chooses is the only love that lasts. And I chose him. I chose them. I chose this. Every single day. The persimmon tree dropped another fruit. Hop Pie squealed. Ji-hoon laughed. The grandmother hummed. And in that hammock, in that city, in that life I never expected, I finally understood what home really means. It's not a place. It's the people who keep choosing you back.